Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the ADD workshop. Today I am going to be taking apart this Ridgid 18 volt cordless brushless air compressor. Now there aren't too many of these cordless air compressors on the market right now. There's a DeWalt, this Ridgid, and I believe Ryobi just came out with one. They are all 1 gallon air compressors, except for the DeWalt, I think maybe a 2 gallon. Either way, all of the specs are almost identical on all of them. They put out right at 0.9 CFM at 90 PSI. And I'll correct myself on that if I was wrong. But anyway, it is a great little machine. I bought this thing, went with Ridgid. Of course, you all know that I am very heavily invested in the Ridgid platform. So I have 10 or 12 batteries for this thing. If it had not been for that, I would not have bought a battery powered compressor. I wouldn't have done it if I knew that I had enough batteries to run this thing for as long as I could possibly want to run it. Speaking of runtime, when I broke this in and it says to put two 4 amp hour batteries in here, open up your bleed valve and let it run until it dies to break it in. I got 35 minutes of runtime, constant. So if you could break that up into whenever it cuts on when you're needing it, you would imagine, honestly, you'll get a pretty good charge out of 2 batteries. And also, all of these were very comparable as far as their run times went when they came out. DeWalt only takes 1 battery, so the largest battery you could put in their compressor would be the 9 amp hour 60 volt flex volt battery. With this compressor though, it gave its ratings with 2 4 amp hour batteries. And at the time, they didn't have too many batteries bigger than that. It was right before they came out with the 5 amp hour, and so they used their 2 4 amp hour batteries that slip in right here. So right off the top, you can imagine this will have way better runtime than any other portable air compressor, because at 35 minutes with 2 4 amp hour batteries, it's comparable with all of the other battery powered compressors on the market. But unlike those, you now can go up to as high as 2 9 amp hour batteries, which would be 18 amp hours instead of 8 with your 2 4. So you'd get more than double the runtime out of this thing, and pretty much double the runtime of any of the other air compressors that run off 18 volt batteries. What made me decide to do this, I really wouldn't be taking this thing apart. I love it too much, and it would worry me too much that I would break something. But here recently, AVE tore down his DeWalt cordless compressor, and considering there's not but 2 or 3 on the market, I figure I can tear down my Ridgid one, see what's going on the inside, and exactly compare it to the DeWalt, which I'll link his video in my video so you can go over and look at it. You can look at the DeWalt being torn apart, and you'll be able to look at this Ridgid being torn apart and see which one you would rather buy. If all things being equal, batteries, everything like that, which one you would buy. So without further ado, we're going to start tearing this thing down. I will say I did not have a long T25 bit, which is the size that I need to take all these nice little torque screws out of these long holes here. So I'm going to end up having to use an Allen wrench key. Yeah, so this is going to be a rather long, boring part of this video. I'll speed up and get through this very quickly, so we can get down to the meat of the potatoes here. has a little filter in the intake. I guess that would be the intake. That's special. Okay, cool. Alright, now we're getting somewhere. Feels like it's trying to let go. Alright, so side panel comes off. And then I believe our other panel would come off. Hopefully. We actually have a belt driven motor in here. Wow. If that isn't shocking, here I will show that to you here in just momentarily. Being very careful because I really don't want to break this thing. It is just about my favorite Ridgid toy. That's right, I called it a toy. It's my favorite Ridgid tool. It just makes things so easy and simple. What am I getting hung up on here? Did I miss a screw? I did miss a screw, of course. Okay. May be able to see more of this thing than I thought without taking it as apart as I thought. Okay, there we go. Alright, now we can get in to see how this thing is set up here. Of course, it's got the ability to hold 2 batteries, and I'd actually been curious to which one most directly went to the motor in case I could come up with some sort of power supply for this thing to run off of a wall outlet. Just in those scenarios. So it's actually a good thing. As you can see, we have a belt drive. This is insane to me. There is no wrist pin over here in your cylinder wall, or in your piston. As you can see here, oh wait, see there is a new wrist pin. And you can see how it will wobble back and forth. And it's a very, wow, very simple design. Just got your air intake right here. It takes a little air filter. Guy goes in there, and yeah, you actually have a belt drive, which that's nice. You wouldn't have to worry about your motor having to deal with the offset of your piston. The oscillation of it would make it not vibrate as much. The motor would not have to deal with the forces of the everything being pretty much out of balance because this is on one side of the pulley. Just like in the DeWalt, as AVE found, there's a little hole there for cooling, and it looks like just barely gets it when the piston's all the way down. I will say this piston looks a little better engineered than the DeWalt one. Our heatsink on the top of this one isn't as beefy, I don't believe. This whole pump assembly here is smaller than it is on the DeWalt. But the belt drive, that gets me more excited than anything, whether it should or not, simply because it separates the motor from what's actually doing the work. Got a very small little piston. Alright. See, we got a little brushless DC motor here. Get a little close look at all the circuitry. Got a little circuit board off in there. Well, that's going to have a little Hall sensor on it so it can know how fast everything's going. You got your little MOSFETs over here. Can we see that? Yep. Yeah, got our little MOSFETs right there. Back side of that heat sink. And then we go over to where our batteries are here. Now, as you can see, these batteries are put in at their own terminals. It's not series together like I thought it was. I thought all these wires would basically come into one point, but they don't, which is very interesting to me, which means, let's see, it looks like each battery has its own MOSFET, which is nice because this machine has a redundancy feature to where you can run it with only one battery if you want. So basically it is everything up into the motor is doubled. You've got double battery, double MOSFET, everything like that. So if one of our MOSFETs blow on the back side here, we would still have our other one and this thing would still run just fine. It would run at half of the runtime because you only have one battery, and it also doesn't have as much amperage running to it either, in which you'll hear it when I get this thing put back together, the difference of having one battery in or two. But for fun, we are going to plug up a battery right now and watch this guy run without all of this stuff in here. So that ought to be fun. Okay, let me grab a battery here. Alright. Alrighty here. So I'm going to slip this guy right there. Switch is on. Turn the switch off. Okay, so we've got a battery in. Now, make sure I'm not touching anything here. We're gonna watch this guy run. That's a very nice thing to watch. I have to say, that didn't get too hot for, I know it was only running for 30 seconds or so, but usually these things would get scalding hot very, very quickly. Let me take this battery out so we don't short anything while I'm messing with it. Alright. Now I know these are oilless compressors, but I almost can't help myself to put just a dabbish of grease around the outside of that piston. And I'm not talking goop it up, I'm talking put a lubricating layer on there. Not even enough to be able to see. May have been a bad idea. There we go. You just keep pushing it around. There. Now my little sidewalls are greased up just a little. I don't know if that's going to do anything bad or good or whatever, but in my mind it's a little rubber sealed piston running up and down piston running up and down a cylinder there. So a little bit of lubrication never hurt anybody. Let's see what it does. Let's just see what it sounds like now that I've lubed it. I want to see if it sounds any different. And it shut off. Now it was at 0. It was the first time I shut it on. And it will fill this thing up in about a minute. 1 minute it can fill up 1 gallon of air. So 1 CFM a minute. And you know, that's not too bad for something this size. I actually alright, well, before I get into this, I'm about to start putting this guy back together. I know we didn't take it too deeply apart. What I really wanted to see was the piston assembly. Motors are motors. This is just a Ridgid motor that they use in a lot of their tools, I would imagine. Pop it in another application, and Bob's your uncle, you're done. I will say that this is extremely dense metal. They've got something on here that is going to dissipate the heat very quickly, because I can tell you that it didn't even get warmer than 100 degrees just warming up one time. Alright, so let me get to kind of thinking about how to put this guy back together here. But yeah, I bought this thing because I started doing maintenance work at an apartment complex, and the apartment complex had absolutely 0 tools. And when I mean 0 tools, they didn't own a hammer. I don't know how they got by. Actually, they didn't. They didn't have a maintenance man for about 6 or 7 months until I came in. And I basically at that point started building my tool collection. I started off with Ridgid because they were not going to pay for my tools if they broke, and I was not going to go buy a bunch of expensive tools and have them break at my job, and me basically not be being reimbursed for them, things like that. So I went for Ridgid. I saw that they had a lifetime warranty, and I said, well, hot dang, there we go. That's what I need, is a tool with a lifetime warranty, so I could use them at my work and not worry about if they broke, would somebody reimburse me and pay for the, you know, pay to have it replaced. I have something with a lifetime warranty. And I slowly started buying every single thing Ridgid had, pretty much. Every paycheck I was at Home Depot, I would buy one thing that made whatever I needed from the past week or that day that I didn't have. I went and bought it right then and there, because it was an investment. It was an investment in my career, in my life, just everything, because having tools for me means eating. I work with my hands. I can absolutely fix anything. As y'all have seen, I've taken apart a lot of things that I have absolutely no idea how they worked, how they came apart, or really how to fix it. All I did was get into it, start taking one screw out at a time, and remembering where they went until you see something that doesn't look right. So when it comes to buying tools, it wasn't hard for me to justify spending a lot of money. Like I said, I was after that warranty at the time. It probably wasn't the best idea for that to be the only reason I was buying Ridgid tools, but I did like their tools. They were really good tools. I did a lot of research before I bought into Ridgid, but when it came down to it, everything they had I liked, and started buying everything up. I got this specifically because I had to popcorn ceilings, and a lot of times I wasn't popcorning more than a bathroom, you know, a 5-foot square room, which meant I could pretty much use whatever I wanted to. So when I went and got this, somebody told me I was absolutely insane for about to try to do with it what I was going to do, which was popcorn a ceiling. They said that's impossible to do with something this small and everything else. Well, I proved them wrong. You just have to take your time. Any air compressor can put out the amount of air up to what it'll hold for a certain amount of time. That's what the CFM is going to change, is how long you can sustain a certain amount of airflow. This, I couldn't sustain 50 psi on a popcorning gun for more than 20 seconds, 25 seconds or so. So what I would do is spray, sit for about 10 seconds, spray, and if you take your time, it works just fine. Now, if you had more than a bathroom to do, I would recommend getting a bigger air compressor. But for what I was doing at the time, it was more than adequate. Oh man, this thing is not wanting to go on here. But yeah, it was more than adequate for what I was doing at the time. And not to mention, I could keep it in my truck, air up tires, and just do all kinds of stuff that really I had gotten tired of doing with a little 12-volt air compressor whenever I needed some air in my truck. So I started carrying this guy around, and you want to talk about being able to air up a tire. 'Cause boy howdy would this thing do it. In which it comes into actually what you want to do with this thing. If you're wanting to air up tires, use it around your house, or just doing whatever, this is a great little air compressor. If you've got high demand tools that take tons of air, your roofer, your things like that, you may want to look elsewhere. This thing is not going to put out the airflow that you're going to need or that you'd be satisfied with. That little crap at the bottom just won't line up. It'd be something you're satisfied with. And like I said, don't go into it thinking it's a 20 CFM air compressor. It truly isn't, and it's not going to do as much as a just 110 air compressor, such as this Ridgid 6-gallon pancake I have sitting next to me over here. If I needed to do something, that's what I would grab. So well, everyone, I don't know if I'm getting this back together. I'm lying. I know I'm getting it back together, but it's just gonna fight me all the way apparently. Oh, I didn't put that back in the other side correctly. Therefore, nothing was lining up. There we go. Look at that beauty. Alright. But yeah, as I was saying, this thing was magnificent for doing the things that I needed to do for it. Man, you see somebody with a flat tire on the side of the road, nice lady, and you want to help. You don't want to step out with a puny little 12-volt air compressor. You want to step out with this guy. You want to step out with a full-blown air compressor that you could do anything you want to with. Let me turn my down to 1 there. I don't want to strip any of these out. But yeah, then you can really actually help somebody, because you're coming in with a compressor. You're not just coming in with an air tank. But you know, I like it. It's a good machine. A lot of people, you know, I think AVE, he did some stuff where he's talking about the efficiency of how it is to charge the batteries and to, you know, to use them, and how you're wasting so much energy trying to charge a battery and then turn it into air. And I'd honestly 100% agree. If you have a 110 volt outlet readily available to you all the time, you're not really going to need this. The time you do need this, you're going to be very happy you have it. I honestly charge my Ridgid batteries in my vehicle as I'm driving. I have a little power inverter, and I charge everything like that, so that honestly I'm using energy that's been made regardless of me charging a battery or not. So I'm actually getting more efficiency out of my vehicle rather than less efficiency out of charging a battery. At that point, if you're running your engine, there's no need to not do something else with it. So yeah, I went in and I started using this. Alright, where'd my screws go? I started using this thing for camping, and I'll explain. Oops, sorry, give you motion sickness there. I go camping a lot, and I always had access to hot water tanks. I would be able to get a hot water tank, an electric one somewhere, or preferably a gas one for what I'm about to explain. What I would do is I had a vacuum pump that I could hook up to my water tank, my hot water tank, and this was, you know, a 30-gallon hot water tank. It was a gas one. Gas valve went bad on it, so I took all that off, and I could run a garden hose off to some water source, a lake or whatever, filter it as it came through the hose, and I would pull a vacuum on the tank with my HVAC vacuum pump. And once the vacuum was pulled, it could literally suck the water from wherever I wanted to without having to worry about pumping it. Which, if anybody's ever tried pumping water up a hill, you know why I would want to do it that way. So anyway, I could take this hot water tank, set it up on a platform of bricks, and build a fire under it, and I had hot water. That hot water tank I then switched over from a vacuum hookup to an air compressor hookup, and then I could pressurize the tank to, let's say, 50 psi, and at that point I had pressurized water. I had a little trailer that had a shower head in it and a place to hook up a water hose, and I could hook up that hot water tank once it was sitting on a fire and have hot water come out of the end of the hose, and it would run over to a shower or whatever, and you would think, oh, this little compressor couldn't keep up, blah blah blah. Honestly, once you initially come up to pressure with this hooked up to your hot water tank, it honestly will run for about 5 minutes without needing this to cut on again. It's quite amazing how much air stays in that system to keep the water pressurized coming out. So I was going to use this for that, because you know, you're on a campsite, you don't want to, if you're out in the middle of nowhere, I mean, I didn't necessarily ever go to campsites. I'd go find just somewhere to go camp. So I could take this and, boy howdy, I could have pressurized water and hot water at that. And anybody that's ever been camping where it was freezing, you know that is a godsend to have some hot water to be able to take a shower with. And even if you went back to go into your tent afterwards, it was still just the most lovely thing. So that's one major use that I use this for. And my point is that there's always a usage case, whether it be however goofy or whatever, there is a usage case for everything. And for me, that was mine. I had very random stuff. Yeah. Come on. Get all the hard screws in, and then the ones on the legs are the hardest ones. Okay. Let's do 2 on these. Yeah. Alright. 2 more little bolts. And you know, everyone, I really hope this video helped somebody decide, well, I'm getting that Ridgid one over the DeWalt. I'm getting the DeWalt over that Ridgid one. Something, you know. And again, I'm not comparing the DeWalt. I didn't take it apart. You can do this for yourself. Just watch my video. I'm going to leave a link to AVE's video where he tore down his DeWalt cordless, and you can see both of them from, you know, both our points of view. And you know, it's kind of all in the eye of the beholder, you know, kind of thing. If you need an air compressor wherever you go and you have things and you want to be able to run them, this is a good way to go. It truly is. But if you've got a lot of air and you need a ton of air all the time when you're out and portable, go with a gas one. A gas air compressor is going to do you a whole lot better than this will. This is for somebody that hardly ever needs air on the go, and when they do, they don't need a whole bunch. A trip I took to Nashville, hit a pothole and blew out my tire. Ended up having I bent my rim and didn't have a donut. Luckily, I had a hammer and a crowbar and some other stuff, and my rim wasn't bent bad enough that I had to get a whole new rim. I sat there with a sledgehammer for 15 or 20 minutes banging on a on a rim on the side of the interstate, and got it straightened back out. And a little 12-volt air compressor would not have done me any good. I needed a blast of air to get my tire to pop back out onto the rim and get the bead to reset. So if I wouldn't have had an actual compressor and just had one of those, you know, little plug into your cigarette lighter 12-volt compressors, I would have been screwed. Well, not screwed. I'd have to call a tow truck, been a couple of $100s, and wouldn't have had anything but a new tire to show for it. With this, I spent a couple of $100 and I was able to fix that tire and a whole bunch of other things, and it's still working for me and going strong. So basically, this thing has paid for itself many, many times over, even though there are many better options than a battery-powered compressor. They have their specific use cases, And when you hit one of those use cases, you will be very thankful that you have this one or the DeWalt one or any of the other ones that are battery powered. Whichever one you need to get, if it makes air, it works. Okay. Like I said, I went with the Ridgid because I have about 10 batteries for it. So no matter what, I can keep this thing running almost all day long if I wanted to. But there's never a usage case for that. If you need it running more than an hour, more than likely you can get to a outlet and you can use a 110 compressor. But anyway, everyone, thank you so much for watching. I know it was a little long-winded, especially there at the end. But, you know, I just wanted to show everyone the inside of this air compressor. You've seen the inside of one of them, and there aren't too many on the market. So between me and AVE, if somebody does the Ryobi one after this, there will be a teardown of just about every 18 volt cordless compressor on the market. Oh, take that back. I believe DeWalt's is 60 volt, but it's still cordless compressor on the market. And once again, thank you everyone for watching, and I will see y'all on the next one.